welcome all to our Think Drinks Day of virtual events and our opening webinar, tuning into the constants and changes of the new drinks landscape. I'm Andrew Catchpole, editor of Harper's Wine and Spirit, and I'm joined today by a fantastic panel with areas of expertise drawn from across the drinks trade, along with our partner for this opening session, Quintessential Brands. We've much ground to cover this morning, and I'm hoping for an insightful and enlightening discussion. But before I ask the panel to introduce themselves and say a quick word each on their role in the industry, a word too on the aim of this session, or aims of this session. Right, the pandemic has had a profound impact on all aspects of the business of drinks, reshaping how trade and consumer interact and behave, while delivering economic uncertainty on an unprecedented scale. Today, as we speak, another reminder of how persistent and long-term this panic is playing out in Westminster. Boris has been announcing 10 p.m. closure order for on-trade operators and a return to emphasis on work from home. I'm sure along with other measures that we haven't quite caught up with yet, but that will impact on the trade. Which is why now, more than ever, it's critical for those producing, supplying and retailing spirits to be tuned into both the constants and the major changes to ensure as fast and sustainable a recovery as possible. And that will take agility, but also be best achieved when that agility is rooted in genuine insights and understanding of how to meet the challenges ahead. This session aims to deliver just that by asking our cross-discipline panel of experts drawn from the worlds of spirits and beyond to assess what the future holds and what consumers will now want from spirits producers and retailers under the new norm. Most of you have probably never taken so many decisions in such a short time frame, with the goalposts sometimes moving on an almost daily basis. But those decisions taken today will, more than ever, affect your future and its outcome. Quick piece of housekeeping before we kick in. There'll be an opportunity for you, the audience out there, to pose questions to our panels. So please do use the Q&A function for any questions you may have, and we'll do our best to answer those questions towards the end of the session. Okay. If everyone is ready, let's start with Charlie. Charlie, could you introduce yourself and outline your current role in relation to the drinks world?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll start with my former role. So I was previously the category leader that headed up beers, wines and spirits for Amazon UK and worked with the pan-European teams across the EU countries that Amazon present in. Now, though, so in April of this year, so right in the middle of lockdown, I moved jobs. I began a new role at Molesey. We are an agency that supports brands who want to sell on Amazon, sell through Amazon to reach their consumers that way.
Excellent, thank you. And Paul?
Good morning all. Paul Pavley, spent 30 years in hospitality working on the operations side. My last role was at Punch. We took the business through sale back in 17 and I left at the beginning of last year. Spent the last 18 months advising and consulting in this space, in the hospitality and leisure space, both for operators, but also businesses that support the sector. That could be drinks businesses or tech. Yeah, that's me.
Excellent, thanks. And Simon, you're looking pensive or reflective there.
Reflective, I was going for. If it came across as pensive, then my apologies. But Simon Cairns, I look after drinks for the Co-op. So I manage all the commercial teams, not just for alcoholic drinks, but for non-alcoholic drinks as well, all the soft drinks as well.
Excellent, thank you. And Dawn?
So I'm Dawn Davies. I'm the head buyer for the Whisky Exchange specialty drinks, and I also manage the events team and the shop. Short and concise. There you go.
Thank you. And Kate?
I'm Kate Nichols. I'm Chief Executive of UK Hospitality, which is the national trade body for hospitality businesses. So we have about 800 member companies who between them operate 85,000 pubs, bars, restaurants, nightclubs, music venues, hotels, accommodation, visitor attractions, coffee shops, a broad, diverse portfolio. But we also have 180 supplier associates, so professional advisors, professional suppliers into the trade to provide that holistic support network for the industry as a whole and make sure that the brand suppliers and particularly food and drink beverage brand owners can work to support their retailers more effectively and support them through this crisis. So we work across both sides of the industry.
Yes, okay, thanks. And obviously well, they're very busy and extraordinary times for all of us, but particularly today, Kate, thanks for joining us with yet more change and going on. Gary, you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Gary Sharp and I'm the joint founder of The Cocktail Lovers. We publish a print and digital magazine which is read all around the world by opinion forming people within the drinks industry and discerning consumers as well. We also have a website, are involved in events and consultancy with brands. So we engage a lot with consumers and brands and the industry.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Ravi?
My name is Ravi Katecha. I'm the managing director and one of the owners of drinksupermarket.com, which is a pure play online retailer, part of the HT & Co drink company, HT & Co group of drink companies. Short and sweet. That's
great. That's the way we like it. That's good. And last but very far from least, Russell with Quintessential Brands, who's a partner in this this webinar. So Russell, a few words from you.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm Russell Kirkham. I'm the Customer Marketing Director for the UK and EMEA for Quintessential Brands. So I'm responsible for all of our activities through all customers, all channels, particularly in the UK, but increasingly across the European and Middle East zones.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. Right. As I said, today we're going to look at constants and then change as it affects the wider drinks trade. But I think first, I was going to stray slightly from the questions in front of me. And Kate, if I could perhaps ask you, and I realise I'm opening up the risk of opening a can of worms here, but wanted to ask you, especially in light of new announcements from the government today, more restrictive measures coming back. Is the government, do you feel, really listening to the needs of the on-trade and hospitality operators and adapting its response in the most supportive way possible? And is it possible for you to give us the sort of the briefer kind of side to that? I mean, are government listening and acting, do you think, in the best way to help support?
It's a bit of a loaded question, that one, isn't it, the way you phrased it? If you'd asked me last week, I would have said yes. I think we've had unprecedented levels of support, and I do think the government had got it and understood the importance of hospitality economically, socially, culturally, and had put in the support measures we needed. Today's announcements suggest they don't quite understand operationally what a big impact some small changes would have. You know, I've had lots of MPs saying to me and ministers saying that, you know, you're just losing an hour of sales at the end of the evening. It's not really that dramatic. So they don't necessarily understand the profit and loss and the business model, but that's the job of a trade association, to be able to explain the detail to them and to try and be able to convince them of what they need to do. And I probably would say it's too soon to say whether they have got a grip of what support the sector needs. Because we know that they are already looking again at what sector-specific support is needed in light of the closure announcements. So there's possibly more to come. One thing I would say is that they don't seem to have grasped, and this is not necessarily a criticism of other trade bodies in the sector or other parts of the sector, they don't seem to have grasped the holistic nature of hospitality and the hinterland, the supply chain. We've done our best to be able to explain it to them, but I don't think they fully understand, you know, if you don't have hospitality, the knock-on effect that has on culture and vice versa. That you've got the supply chain that is made up of many thousands of small independent businesses. And that's the thing that I don't think they've really realized. They focused and prioritized support on the on-trade businesses themselves as the quickest and best way of getting support cascading back up through the supply chain, but it's not quite as simple as that. And today's announcements are quite far-reaching. Although the headline is the 10 p.m. curfew, there's lots behind it, which mean that effectively we are back to where we were in July, actually possibly worse than where we were in July. So all that summer of hard work, getting momentum going, building consumer confidence, convincing people that we were COVID secure and safe, all undone. So it is going to need quite a dig deep on support. And, you know, we can touch on some of the issues that they're talking about today, but 10 p.m. curfew is just the start of it.
Yeah, so I was thought looking at the, you know, August's Eat Out to Help Out, large part of that surely was to help rebuild kind of consumer confidence, get consumers going out again. Understanding that, you know, the vast majority of on-trade and hospitality venues that are open are safe and are meeting some of those challenges. So I think that's probably a nice segue into one of the first topics that I want to bring up. And it's let's start with consumer habits, specifically socializing. What do you think, panel? Will the desire to meet, mix and relaxing company continue apace, or in what way might it adapt and change, at least in the short and possibly even medium term? I might bring you in at the beginning, Russell, because I believe at Quintessential you have looked into this, done quite a bit of research into this as it stands at the moment. Obviously, it's a constantly changing sort of landscape. But
yeah, I mean, completely. I mean, Kate's just hit the nail on the head that it's you know, an announcement that comes out in the last 24 hours has a massive impact on everything that happens with what consumers can go and do and what retailers, operators and suppliers have to do to react to that. I mean, we have been doing as much work as possible to support our customers by listening to what consumers are wanting to do, but obviously consumers can only ever react to whatever the latest advice and legislation is. And the Eat Out to Help Out scheme was a really key example of that. We all hoped it would have a good impact on driving some footfall into the on-trade, but really nobody knew how much of an impact it would have. Certainly, I think at the beginning we saw that, you know, consumers, we had research from some data from an insight partner we work with called Tracker, who indicated that around half of consumers said that they wanted to go out into trade less because they were very concerned about health. And actually, you've seen in the data, particularly if you look at some data that came out from Kantar recently in the last week, that's actually a huge compounding, increasing footfall drive into the on-trade because of Eat Out to Help Out. And it was just completely unexpected. CGA had said themselves that they didn't expect it to be as big as that. And it was essentially delivered double. August was double the size of last August because of that scheme, which is fantastic. And so how we as a supplier support our customers to react to those things is critical. So we did a lot of work with our on-trade customers to give them kind of health safe ways of meeting this new demand. So dealing with this new occasion of smaller groups in their little bubbles in the on-trade who are also having to deal with track and trace in their own outlets, deal with staff who want to feel safe. So we were trying to give them solutions to help them help their customers, their clientele feel safe. But you know, but it was about how we reacted as a supplier and many others. You know, but we had to react as quickly as we could, whilst also trying to support our other customers in other channels who are also trying to deal with this unknown. It's the key part of this whole pandemic has been, you know, being, as you said at the beginning, Andrew, at the beginning, you know, being agile, but also listening and reacting as quickly as you can, supporting our customers, which is, as a supplier, that's our responsibility, you know, paramount, really.
Okay, just to advance that, because obviously all the way from consumer behaviour and how that alters and changes right back up through the supply chain affects absolutely everything. Let's bring in Paul. Perhaps what are your thoughts on how socialising consumer behaviour may evolve or may not evolve? Is it all going to fall back into place relatively quickly? I mean, we're fairly habitual, humans recover after crises, or do you think there will be some significant changes that the trade will continue to adapt to?
I think people want to socialise still. They are apprehensive in some age groups of going out. I think Eat Out to Help Out helped a lot of that. People visiting restaurants and bars and pubs locally and seeing it was safe to go out. And I think the government's latest step, you know, is 3 steps backwards to unreassure people that it's safe out there. So it's not just an hour. People won't go out for the night because if you're going to have to leave by 10, then go stay at home and do something different. So I think that's a real back step. but consumers do want to socialise. What's going to change in the short term, and I mean 12, 18 months, is where they socialise. And we're already seeing a lot of suburban venues doing really well because people aren't travelling into town for work, and also aren't travelling to town at night because they just don't want that travel time on transport, public transport. So where they socialise is going to change. There's so much pent up demand from consumers that want to go out, and they just need that tipping over the edge to come out more often. So much more local, and when they go out local, they're going to want to experience the experiences they had in their workplace venues that they went to. So, you know, local bars are going to have to make sure that they are up in their game in a way, and making sure that the brands are on the bar that the consumers were used to drinking when they were in cities and town centres. And for brand owners, it's making sure that, you know, there was a phrase yesterday about go where the people are. I think that was Prett's phrase. And brands are going to have to go where the people are going. And it may be in venues that they didn't plan to be in 2 years ago, but the world is changing. The demand is there. People just need a bit more reassurance, but they want to receive a slick personal experience wherever they are, whether it's in their local pub or a local bar or their local restaurant.
So let's bring in, I think bring in one of the, for someone from the brand side. I mean, Dawn, perhaps specialty drinks. I mean, what do you have to add to that from the sort of brand perspective?
I think in terms of...
I can ask you a more specific question. Are people sticking with tried and trusted favourites at the moment? Are they expanding their repertoire because they've had perhaps more time to sit at home, to search online? Will habits like that stick? What's your experience, perhaps directly through your portfolio and looking at the broader market?
So I think for me, actually, we have to also pick up the positives that come out of COVID. You know, we have to be positive about this. We have to move forward together. We have to be creative. We have to open doors that were not there before. And, you know, what we're seeing is that people are experimenting more, you know, that they aren't just sticking with the tried and tested. And it's a really exciting time in that respect, you know. And I think that's where, if you're a solid brand, and I think actually the winners of this game will be the ones that were the most agile, that had the ability to move quickly and to support in the right ways. I think the ones that are damaging their brands are ones that sat back and said, we're in a crisis, oh God. You know, I look at places like Trailer Happiness, who were selling hats and t-shirts and really going after clients. And, you know, and I think it's people like that, it's people that have really made the efforts. Actually, it's a lot of the smaller brands that have made better efforts and more creative efforts than the big brands that are going to win this. And, you know, I think that's what's so exciting in a way. You know, there's a hell of a lot of problems we're going to have to overcome and face, but there's going to be some positives that come out of this. And for me, what's going to be exciting, I was at Artisan Bar a couple of weeks ago, and Anna turned around and said, you know, I'm not putting brands on the menus anymore, because it allows me to bring in some of the smaller guys and support them and not just get money from the big boys. And that can only be good for the consumer, because it's going to be about quality, and it's going to be about going after what's right. You know, we're already seeing people really kind of engaging what's right and what's wrong about brands now. And I think it's going to be a very interesting time. And I think the brands and the retailers and the businesses are going to have to up their game, because the one thing that I'm super worried about is abuse in the industry, especially in the hospitality and event sector. Sorry, that was my passionate drive there. Bam.
Yes, no, so you're suggesting that actually consumers are remaining adventurous, and if brand owners, suppliers, retailers can respond to that agile that word cropping up so far, then there are benefits there, and there are positives moving forward. I mean, maybe bring in Gary. What's your take on that? On what consumers are demanding going forward?
Yeah, I think the thing that always strikes me about this industry is how incredibly resilient it is, and how adversity quite often brings out the best in people and makes them more creative. And I think what we've seen, we've made a point of visiting a lot of bars over the last month or two since the previous lockdown eased. And I think the bars we've visited, they've really made an effort to adapt their offerings, be within the law, whether it's visors, whether it's distancing, whatever. And I think they've got strong enough relationships with their clientele that they are seeing those people come back, which I think is very promising. having said that, I think one thing that we're hearing a lot from bar owners is that they do want a little bit more consistency in what they're being asked to do, because sometimes it feels as though they're given a sort of, oh, you can do this, it's up to you kind of thing, which is fine, but it's not actually helping them make their decisions. And in turn, it's not helping consumers make decisions, because it's like if they go to one bar and they are wearing a mask and they go to another bar and they're not, it's almost like, shouldn't we have a bit more of a level playing field for consumers to choose from? But prior to the announcements that we're hearing today, I was encouraged by seeing how many people were going back to bars. And also, to pick up on a point that Paul made earlier, I think we will see the rise of the good neighbourhood bar. We're already aware of a few sort of neighbourhood bars that have opened during this difficult time. And I think we will see the rise of the neighbourhood bar as well.
So that could be one very interesting development and evolution, actually. As you say, the shift away from perhaps some of those more city centre sites. And I think today as well, as we're now being discouraged again to into offices to continue to work from home if we can do. And I guess there also just becomes a sort of time frame within which, if you want to get your business up and running again, or focus, you've got a larger estate, look at which of those outlets you're going to focus on. Then that's just going to be a natural progression, isn't it? I mean, Russell, could we come to you? And Ravi and Simon, I will come to you and talk about your side of the trade. But Russell, are you finding that? I mean, you're sitting there with can't quite see every label, with some lovely brands behind you. And what are you actually finding is the case with sales, which I guess is the litmus test, isn't it, at the moment? What's flying out the door and what isn't? Are people retreating to the really tried and trusted brands, or are you experiencing this broader swathe of engagement?
I mean, I think brands still have a place because people see the brand as a trust thing. But I think particularly when lockdown happened and you had a slowdown in you had on trade shut entirely, and everyone kind of came in and on of themselves and stayed in their local areas. I think you saw a huge growth in people going to their local convenience stores. You saw on trade outlets pivoting and doing click and collect or delivery. You saw, particularly Simon, I'm sure, will talk to how the co-op have had a fantastic time during lockdown, but we've also saw a shift in occasions. So although we've seen people come and, alcohol has been a big driver of sales throughout lockdown, even as regulations change, we've seen a big shift in occasions. So people are, when they couldn't go to the on-trade, they were going to parks and open spaces and their gardens. And so you saw a huge increase as lockdown went on, and the weather improved in RTDs. So we saw a lot of our RTDs from Opia and Bloom and Greenhalghs, as well as own label that we make, hugely drive in sales because people were consuming stuff in their gardens and open spaces. But also, I think everyone was talking about flavoured gin pre-lockdown, and that's continued to be quite big. But actually, a lot of consumers have come back to London Dry Gin and gone back to the classics. And so I think it's been a really interesting. It's been a really interesting period of time for a spirits producer, because you're seeing all these different trends. But obviously, then, inevitably, there's probably going to be some questions around how we all help each other to modify what we drink and how we drink. If lockdown continues at the pace that it's going. So there's some interesting challenges ahead for the industry, and it's ones that we recognise.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting, that sort of balance between on and off trade, between at home drinking and out to favourite on trade oasis, etc., and where that sort of balance lies and what the tip is from that. Did you want to? Would you like to come in with sort of thoughts on that balance between on and off trade and where brands currently can best play to their strengths, how they manage this really uncertain kind of balance, this sort of, now backwards and forwards. And, I think realistically we could expect through restrictions or perhaps a return to more localized restrictions, but there's going to be a sort of certain yo-yo effect, isn't there? Possibly well into next year. We just don't know. How do brands manage all that, do you think?
I mean, I've said before, I mean, I'd be interested to hear Simon's view, but for us, we've got to listen to our customers. We've been working really closely, for example, with Co-op and many of our other customers to react to all of this uncertainty. Kate talked about the fact that, you know, the legislation and what government has said they've been trying to listen, and then, I mean, the question in recent day or so, but it is about us all listening and supporting each other. And Dawn said about how we've got to, as you know, we make a number of brands, as you said, a number of them are on the shelves conveniently behind me, but we are, you know, a producer that needs to, we're only ever as good as the supply that we can produce for our customers. And so listening and reacting, and we were able to be as agile as possible during lockdown and react to the customers as people hit the supermarkets, hit the convenience stores, bought actually quite a few different things. And so as a brand owner, our brands needed to react to that and make sure that they were available. I mean, that's the key part. As a partner in any industry, we've got to play our part. And that's one that we really very much focused on.
So no, yes, I think I may have had a technical glitch at this end earlier. I kind of everything froze for me for a while, but I picked up on you coming back. I was going to bring Charlie in, but as you mentioned, Simon, would you like to pick up on that and speak from the multiple retail side?
By all means, yeah. I mean, first and foremost, what I would say is, as a consumer, I really hope the on-trade recovery continues swiftly, because I can't wait to get out and spend a bit more time in bars. But I think, picking up on a couple of the points I've heard, yes, from our point of view, sales have been really strong. There has obviously been a migration from the on-trade into the off-trade. I think what comes with that is an increased consumer expectation, that what they find on the high street offers them that diversity and that interest that they're used to seeing in the on-trade, because that on-trade route has been close to them. It's not been available to them. So I think it's certainly making us, as a retailer, think long and hard about how we are more innovative in terms of what we present, how we get on board with more of these trends, be it in gin from berry through to tropical flavors. And certainly what we're seeing drive the growth are things like the flavored gin still, but also rum has done very well for us. And it's not necessarily just been about the brands. I think with our own brand as well, it's been those innovative products within own brand that have done especially well for us. So we kind of launched a summer variant of gin, which was a passion fruit, mango and elderflower, which has done incredibly well. But I think because it's on trend at the moment, I think the next step for us is to start to say, well, how does this play out in the future? Do more of these what were out of home occasions start to move in home? And if that is the case, how do we try and make the way that we retail spirits more engaging, more exciting? How do we have more of that conversation that consumers are used to having in the on-trade, with a bartender or with the menu or with a digital interaction? How do we start to bring that to life in our world as well? Because it is an exciting category, and consumers come to it because they want excitement and they want innovation and they want something new, but they also want somebody to guide them about what those flavor trends are and what they're looking for. And I think that's the challenge we have, particularly when typically between our spirits fixture and the customer is a till. You know, there's a barrier that stops people going and actually browsing a lot of our spirits fixtures, which is something that we need to find ways to overcome.
So, Ravi, perhaps I could ask you, how is this the time? Is this the time for innovation to really drive consumers forward to sort of new pastures, to exciting variants, to low and no, to 101 things that are going on out there in the ever-moving drinks world? Where's Ravi? You've just popped around on my screen. Hi.
Yep. Hi.
What's the drink supermarket?
Yeah. So from what we've seen, I mean, there's in terms of innovation, I mean, the drinks industry, especially in the last sort of 5 years, has not stopped evolving and not stopped innovating. So you see now more than ever a huge variety of different products, and people are always innovating. I mean, from the rise of sort of RTDs, and then you've had the gin boom, and now rum is in trend, tequila still on trend, mezcal still trending. Premium is extremely strong. But then you're also in the low and no categories. I mean, across all categories, the amount of innovation has just been immense, and I don't think that's going to stop. And I think with consumers, what we tend to find, what we found, especially in lockdown, is and as Russell mentioned it as well. I mean, going back to your classics, that is something that we had a feeling may happen, and it did happen. There's a lot of people did end up purchasing a lot of the classics, so your classic sort of London Dry and Schweppes or Fever Tree tonics. But also, you know, in other categories like beers. So as the on-trade sort of started to come to the fore because of lockdown, and the on-trade, or the sales were getting sort of eroded, and things like, you know, your regular Stella Artois and Budweiser and, you know, your regular pub lines, they were very, very strong during that period. But then as sort of the Eat Out to Help Out kicked in, I think that was quite a good move by the government. That definitely helped. And what we started to see, especially through our on-trade side of the business, is those businesses that were sort of well equipped, those businesses that had a premium offering, and I think Paul mentioned this as well, that those places that upped their game, they saw a massive rise in sales. And I think that will continue going forward, is that if everyone starts to sort of, you know, work together and ensure that we can offer customers a premium sort of experience, but, you know, take that away from certain on-trade outlets and bring it into sort of your household needs. And, you know, if we can bundle together like cocktail bundles and, you know, give consumers things like, you know, jiggers and manuals and online tasting sessions, I think, you know, that is how we are going to overcome especially the next 3 months with Christmas, because the on-trade is going to be heavily affected in the next 3 months, and it's normally the biggest time of the year for everyone, retail and on-trade. But as on-trade sales go down, you know, we have to try and carry through that experience through the off-trade and the at-home drinking as well. Because the other thing that worked sort of in the on-trade's favor in the last 3 months, as well as Eat Out to Help Out, I mean, we've had pretty good weather. Okay, there was patches of rain, but I think the weather definitely helped. And I think that's where people came together as large groups. But with the new lockdown rules and the rule of 6, and you're in smaller groups, I don't think people are going to stop spending. I think they will carry on spending, but I think it's our job as retailers and sort of brand owners and distributors to make sure that we put together a strong enough experience so customers can still feel that they're having a good time, but in sort of a sensible and safe environment, you know. And I think that's probably the most important thing, especially in the next 3 months. And I think the industry, you know, if we work together to make that happen, I think, you know, we will come out of this quite strong with a lot of lessons learned, and, you know, and I think a lot of businesses that have been slow to adapt previously, you know, they would definitely have learned how to sort of, you know, make changes a lot quicker. I mean, we're quite an agile business, and I'm sure, you know, like Speciality, they're a fairly agile business as well. And I think working with the likes of Quintessential, who have understood that. I mean, if you look at like Diageo, they were a lot slower to react, and I think a lot of the larger guys, whereas with Quintessential, what we saw is sort of the mid-tier agencies and the boutique agencies. They're extremely creative. They were willing to help. They were willing to sort of support the consumers because they lost sort of sales in other areas. So I think that's quite important. And yeah, so I think the next 3 months, as I mentioned, is going to be very critical. I think if we can carry on with that sort of offering consumers a premium experience at home, I think we'll be okay coming out of this. But from the hospitality side, and what Kate has seen in her market is, and I think she may probably concur that is that a lot of places do have to up their game to make sure consumers are safe. And there are ways that we can carry this through. There are ways that we can work this out, through innovation, through sort of, if you're in a restaurant, you have an app, and you have table service. I think that's a strong means. I think when consumers enter certain establishments, getting their temperatures checked, making sure there's adequate hand gels, making sure the bathroom facilities and the bar areas are all clean, that everything is tidy. I think the old places, they will suffer, but especially in sort of nicer areas, I think the bar owners and the restaurant owners will adapt and will definitely come through this, and they would have learned.
I think that's Ravi, thanks. Some really, really good points there. And I want to run on with that, as you say, especially in this period in the run up to Christmas, an absolutely critical time for the trade, both on and off trades, and how each side can learn from each other, sort of innovation, making experience. I just want to bring Charlie in first, and I might come over to Kate and speak more about the actual experience in the on trade when you go out. But Charlie, what's your take on if I was to propose that perhaps we'll see less of a division, less barriers between the on-trade over here and the off-trade over there? And there's obviously always been interaction and learning, and trends have passed from one to the other. But is that becoming a little bit more of a moot point, that the whole point at the end of the day, whether it's going to be in a bar or restaurant setting or in-home drinking setting, is for drinks to engage across the board now and to kind of establish themselves sort of through all areas to bring people in? Is that old sort of division on off trade, is that less useful at the moment or going forward?
I think brands are definitely thinking more harder about that. They're really getting into, okay, how do we address this omni-channel challenge of you experience something perhaps in the on trade, but how do you move that into the home? How do you understand that a customer journey may not just be in one side or the other, but they can access brands throughout different elements and different touch points of their lives, but have that ability to give them that same experience. If we do go into a much stricter version of lockdown again, or shutdown, I think they're now phrasing it as, how is that addressed? And I think a few of the key points that came out for me were around the agility, being able to react to that, if even when it does, assuming perhaps it will, and thinking about how you shift your inventory from the on trade to the off trade and balancing it in a way that works for everybody. And the most successful brands through sort of that April-May time period that we saw online and through Amazon were those who were able to make that quick adjustment, and were able to do it very, very quickly, get things lined up and ready to be able to give customers that choice. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to, is a customer wants to have the ability to choose what they want, and they want to find the brands that they are looking for, while being perhaps educated on that journey, and using the online environment to provide that education so that you have a loyal customer at the end of that situation is a great way of trying to approach it. And giving them those same examples. I think Ravi had some great points on kind of those Zoom tastings, understanding how you can give that that same education, that same experience, or just a more social environment while you're doing your drinking at home. Bundling, and we've seen a huge amount of bundling, success in bundling through the last 4 or 5 months, where providing an entire cocktail kit and helping people make their cocktails and reproducing that experience at home. I mean, online through that period saw roughly a 10 percentage point increase in share of off-trade retail, so not just BWS, but total retail. That's obviously and naturally slipped away a bit over the last couple of months, but there have been some really sticky habits formed as a result of that. A lot of consumers who we've surveyed have said that they shopped BWS for the first time on Amazon. Over 2.1 million of them did that during lockdown, and 90+% said that they would maintain shopping for BWS on Amazon and other e-commerce channels as well. So that's got to be part of a strategy now. That's got to be, it can't be, oh, online is that thing off to the side over here. It's got to be part of the all-encompassing strategy of route to market, route to customer, but not the only route either. Everything's got to come into play, and not forget that the on-trade does exist, and people do want to be out there and do want to be enjoying drinks in nice social environments, and how to make that possible in the most successful way for everyone, I think.
Well, I think this is exactly what you're saying, and again, yeah, some great points. Let's bring this firmly to the on-trade now, sort of away from brands, well, away from the brands a little, but to the actual operators themselves. So online, e-commerce, reaching out, different ways of channels of reaching consumers, the actual need to do that, to rebuild confidence. And obviously we've seen that, we've touched on Eat Out to Help Out. We've seen amazing innovation, I mean, right across the trade. But also the sheer adaptability that's been necessary from on-trade outlets. We've saw customer confidence rise, people going out. I'm sure we've all read 101 surveys and research looking at, you know, different segments, those that are gunning to go out, those that are cautiously going out, those that are still staying at home, etc., etc. So we've got some way there. Obviously, the dial's been set back a little bit, not least from you know, today. But in terms of actually then what we've learned so far, what the on-trade's learned so far, going ahead, what are the most important things that that we have learned? Maybe I can come to you, Kate, and then perhaps you, Paul. What are the most important lessons the on-trade has learned so far in a very fast-moving and changing kind of environment in terms of how to make that, the importance of making that eating out, that drinking out experience as comfortable and as attractive for customers as possible?
Well, just to start, I think I'd probably challenge Ravi's suggestion that we needed to do much more and up our game in terms of COVID secure. I think the hospitality sector has worked really hard to get world-beating COVID secure protocols in place. They are widely implemented. They are supported by customers. All the consumer data that we've got says that people accept there's a little trade-off between experience and COVID secure, but it's necessary to keep people safe. I think one of the things the off-trade could learn from the on-trade as we go back into what will be a much tighter lockdown, as I say, today's announcements about 10 p.m. curfew, be in no doubt, they will affect the off-trade, they will affect the home, they will affect travel to work, they will affect a whole wider range of businesses, because there's a lot more that's coming around it. I think the off-trade could certainly learn about being a bit more COVID secure from the on-trade and having in place some of the restrictions and some of the hygiene and sanitation. It was high when they reopened in end of June. It's almost gone now. So I think they need to put it back if we've got fragile consumer confidence. That's my first point. Second point, in terms of what the on-trade has done, it's shown beyond doubt that it's innovative, it's dynamic, it's been able to respond to what consumers are looking for, and we've rapidly telescoped the rollout of technology and new interventions that would have normally taken months to be able to put in place. We've managed to do that in weeks, particularly things like table ordering, apps, payment ordering apps, check-in apps, all of those kind of things. That technological development has been done very, very quickly, and it's been done in the independent community segment as well. So your traditional community boozers as well as your restaurants. That means that consumers have a lot more of information at their fingertips, and it means that there's an automated process. Now that's incredibly challenging for brand owners as we go into a new environment where the government is ratcheting it up to say it's table service only, and it's sort of either, we don't know yet, but potentially you can just whiz up to the counter, order, and then it's delivered to you, or you're seated and you're ordering via an app. Now that means that brand owners have to work even harder to make their brands stand out, because the consumer who's still taken the chance and still wants to go out in the on-trade when we've got a 10 p.m. curfew, which is close the premises by 10, not sort of last orders, when you've got restriction on non-essential travel, when you've got work from home and don't go out, when you've got table service only, that customer who's still chosen to go out has made the decision that they're having the experience. The brand, the drink, what they're having is secondary to that. And if you then put a filter between you where you're not having to see the brands at the bar because you're whisked to a table, or you're having to make your choice through an app, you're going to have to work really hard to get that stand out. Because by the time I've sat and scrolled through some of these apps, I just go for the easiest option, and it might just be, it's not my normal tipple, but it might just be I go for the bog standard gin and tonic and just order the gin and tonic rather than doing the selection. Equally, there's potentially an upside there that those who do invest in genuine table service have an opportunity to upsell. But I think that is a very changed environment, and that technology changes it. And I do agree with Charlie that there is that stickiness. What we've seen through lockdown, yes, there was an increase in takeaway, delivery, Deliveroo, and online. It slipped back naturally, but it hasn't slipped back to pre-COVID levels. So I think consumers are going to build from that and look at a sort of omni-channel experience. And that's one of the things that we're going to have to deal with in the hospitality world. And then the final challenge is, for the brands as well as the industry, quite clearly, if we're living with this for 6 months, we are not going to have our busiest trading period. Now, that has a huge knock-on effect up the supply chain if we cannot do the trading period between Halloween and New Year's Eve. And I wouldn't want to put any bet that we'll be able to do anything other than rule of 6 there. And the final note to end on, just to sort of be really depressing, Michael Gove was pushed on a news broadcast today to say, did he think 6 people drinking in a pub, 6 mates, was an acceptable socializing? And he said, no, that's non-essential socializing. Now, that is a nail in the coffin of a lot of the trade that we were thinking we might have between now and coming out of this sort of second lockdown. So I think, again, that is going to put the onus on brands and operators. The operators are going to focus on the experience of socializing. The brands are going to have to work really hard to get any drink count.
Okay, yeah, no, a lot of very good points there, and obviously new challenges being introduced at the moment. And I think obviously we all know the terrible difficulties faced by so many operators out there in the on-trade. Anyone else like to add on that or pick up on any of Kate's points? Paul, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, it's always great following Kate. Thanks for that, Kate. I think.
Sorry about that.
I've always aspired to do that. Yeah, I guess the operating safe venues. I think a lot of operators have learned in the last 2 months that they maybe have been a bit too safe and over-engineered some of the policies and processes in place, and hopefully they'll make those work better for their business going forward. Doesn't mean packing the place out, but it just means making the process and the policy work better. I guess what a lot of brands have also learned over the last 12 or so weeks, mainly during lockdown, was that they can engage with consumers both on and off trade. Dishoom, Coat, Hawksmoor, who hasn't had a Dishoom bacon roll at home at the weekend. So a lot of operators have worked out that you can actually have a relationship with a consumer both in venue and out of venue, which has been really, really great. And also operators have learned which brands they want to work with in the future. And we keep hearing a lot about brands, and I guess, for fear of upsetting some of my fellow panelists here, as a consumer, you just want a really exciting list of drinks. You don't really care whose they are. You want excitement on the list, and that means it's brands and independents on that list, neither one nor the other, a mixture of both. So I think a lot of bars will have probably done a bit more of that. And on Dawn's point, people are experimenting. People want to be excited on their drinks range. And the biggest learning for me in the last 6 or 8 weeks has been technology and the use of apps. And there's companies that in the past said they'd never have an app in between them and their consumers. Lounges as an example, they wanted that face-to-face customer service interaction, and their app now accounts for 40% of their overall revenue. That whole tech journey has come forward, in my view, 3 to 5 years, where companies and operators didn't want technology involved. And it's not just about a tool to place an order. And I agree with Kate. Some apps just make it really hard to get what you really want. For me, it's about making that experience seamless and frictionless, and letting me go in one day to a venue and ordering on the app, and another day when I want somebody to talk to me, being able to order via a face-to-face, to let me choose how. Don't make it one or the other. And the thing with tech that we forget on the apps is actually the valuable stuff is the data that gives us as a operator and brand owner. Who came in? What did they drink? How long were they here for? Why did they come in here? So there's a whole bit about data coming out of that. So tech for me has been a massive a learning curve for a lot of operators over the last 2 or 3 months, and what they can do with that data. We've had data coming at us for years, but no one's done anything with it. And I'm seeing now operators doing a lot more with their data and using it to try and, drive their revenue lines.
I think it's actually an incredibly valuable point, actually, specifically on the value of that data, and if it's flowing in through an app, and it's surely customers must be able to mine that and use that to, especially at the moment, sort of hone their operation. I know people with 1,000 different things that are going on, but and especially looking ahead, that's kind of key. So there's been a big shift there potentially. I don't know if anyone else wanted to add to that, or wanted to move on. And I'm aware out there we have had some questions in, and I will promise to get around to those audience questions. So anyone else want to add anything else on the sort of app online side of things? The interaction and how that's evolved?
No, go for it, Gary.
All right. No, all I was going to say, I think all the points about technology are really, really valid, and I totally agree. But also, I think the whole thing about going to a bar is let's not lose sight of why we go, that human interaction. And I think as an example, we visited, we were talking about neighbourhood bars. We visited one a couple of weeks ago, a brand new one near Knightsbridge. And all the technical stuff was almost, a given. That wasn't like, oh, we're doing QR codes or we've got online menus. That was a given. What actually struck us, and obviously other people in the bar, was how they were engaging with their community. They were doing things like they were cleaning up the area outside their bar, and that attracted the community. They were cleaning up the benches that had nothing to do with them over the road. People were asking them. They've got an outside terrace. They were putting down a dog bowl, so people were stopping off to talk to them. So the thing was, they were engaging with their community as human beings. So technology, great, absolutely buy that. But let's not lose sight of the fact that you're going to bars for human interaction. And I think that's something that great bar owners do really well. It's about hosting.
I think that's also relevant as a brand owner as well. I think as a consumer now, it's not, yes, innovation, absolutely, but also what does your brand stand for in terms of your sustainability, your ethics, your role within society. And I think what we're starting to see is, the brands that have a clear message, be it around carbon reduction or recycled packaging, are starting to have more and more resonance with consumers at the moment. And I think that's a particularly relevant point if you are a brand owner, is not just to pin your hopes on innovation, but it's how you perform and how you behave as a brand.
I think also what's super interesting is we as a faceless entity, i.e. an online retailer, you really have to rethink about how you put a face to your brand and how you put a face to who you are. We've done a lot. I mean, I think I've spent more time on Zoom talking to screens and going online doing tastings than I am doing my daily job. For example, Whiskey Show, we've moved away from Zoom because we don't think it's what the customer wants. They don't want to sit and listen to us on Zoom. They want to interact with our brands, and we have over 200 talks. We have some of the 75 of the best distillers in the world where the consumer can actually talk to them on a virtual platform, not just Zoom. So, I think what we've really, really tried to do is put the people back into the business, which I think is hugely important, because people buy people. They don't necessarily just buy brands. And, be that in a bar, think about it. You go to a bar, what's the thing you remember at the end of the day? The people, not necessarily the drinks, not necessarily the food. It's about the people. And, we've really got to become the face of our businesses and really kind of stand behind them and make ourselves counted now. I think that's super important.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Dawn. I was just going to add that, because I think Paul raised a really good point, which is that, different brands such as Dishoom and others have built this different dialogue, and Dawn, you just talked to about a show and how we engage with people who are interested in a particular category. And I think the challenge facing the whole industry, but particularly from a supply perspective, is that with this new shutdown or whatever it's been called. I think we've suddenly started calling it shutdown. I'm not sure where that just came in from, but the idea that things are changing again is we've got to all change the way that we engage with our customers and our consumers. And so the on-trade will survive because they'll build that dialogue about the future. You've seen schemes where music venues have offered tickets to future gigs to try and drive interest and engagement. And from a branded perspective, brands have had to shift the way that they speak to their consumers. It can't ever be about the experience anymore per se, because those experiences were unattainable during lockdown. And so as a brand, as a brand owner, we've had to change the way that we engage and have discourse with our consumers. So, for example, Bloom, which is a brand, which is one of our gin brands, and it's about made by women for women. And they realised that their brand fans were absolutely reacting to the challenges in their life, and particularly a huge number of people were contacting us about weddings being cancelled because all the wedding venues and on-trade and restaurants that they were going to go and host and have parties for their weddings were being shut. And so we changed the way that we were engaging with them and offered ways to kind of mitigate and add a bit of fun back into their future weddings with a giveaway and different ways of just having a bit more fun during the lockdown, because it was about kind of keeping everyone engaged and talking to them and listening to them. But also we're going to have to keep doing that as an industry to be able to react to the changes that we've got, and to keep people wanting to be in the on-trade, so that when they can be back into the on-trade properly and not being kicked out at 9:30 at night, it will be something that they really want to do. So how we continue having this different conversation using, as Charlie said, about this multi-channel, omni-channel approach is going to be critical. Everyone's got to shift the way that they do things, especially from a supply point of view. That's particularly on us.
I mean, there are a lot of different things coming out there about communicating brands, credentials, how you get that across, how you do that as an online, how you can do that in now different circumstances within on-trade venues, for example, and just the changing ways in which consumers approach brands, and things to do with sustainability. I think I might have already mentioned some social credentials, etc. And I think obviously especially important with, not unimportant, growing importance with older consumers, but of special importance with younger consumers as well. So many things there. I'd like to bring in a couple of. I'm aware time is running very fast. Massive topic, and I know we could all keep talking about it for quite some time, I think. But so a couple of questions throughout the panel. One from Andy Ahmed Walsh, who wants to put this to Simon initially. Andy asked, the great thing about on-trade is the experience you get and the ability to experiment with different drinks and categories without having to purchase a full bottle of something. How best can brands work with off-trade retailers to try and drive this experimentation in a completely different environment?
It's a very good question, and it's one that we constantly challenge ourselves with. I mean, one thing to bear in mind, we do an awful lot with pre-mixed cans. RTDs are a huge part of our business in the off-trade. So I do think there is opportunity for more innovation in that format, which is a lower cost of entry into the kind of spirits and cocktail market. So that's certainly something to look at. We are doing an awful lot with the likes of Deliveroo and with our own Co-op online app. So I think Charlie's mentioned it before around the bundle deals and how we try and bring together innovative ideas to try and say, well, look, if you're gonna get together in a very socially responsible way for an at-home experience, then here's a solution for you, which is a very easy to make, easy to recreate cocktail that you've perhaps enjoyed in the on-trade. But I do think it is an industry problem. We historically have relied on the on-trade as an innovation pipeline. And what we've normally seen is these trends develop in the on-trade, and then they kind of seep into the off-trade. So we are very reliant. There is a symbiosis there between on and off-trade. And we absolutely need to make sure that the on-trade is still providing that innovation for us.
So there's still, I think, so much that can be done with format, with packaging, with dispense,
with format, with packaging. Yeah, with I think the digital conversation we can have, and we've been doing, the buyers within my spirits team, we've been doing the kind of online mixology sessions, which is great. And all of that is working well for us, but I do think we need to accelerate more within the on-trade channel.
Yeah, okay. So let's take another one from Dan Hall. Hi, Dan. Dan says, we seem to be seeing a rise in direct-to-consumer online retail. Uses an example, Ninefold Distillery Rum. Does this indicate potential wider adoption of this model and possibly even the dropship model popping up as in this sector, as has been seen in fashion, other retail arenas, etc.? I don't know. Does anyone like to pick that up? So I suppose it's essentially a question about the ongoing importance of direct consumer online retail, which obviously we saw during total lockdown with some operators. Most that I spoke to didn't begin to come close to making that much of a dent in the loss of profit and income, but it did at least have send out a very strong, powerful message. We're still here. We'll be back in business. This is our brand. This is what we're doing. We're being innovative, and often perhaps it would be quite sort of community focused in the sense that you'd only be able to have a drop off or pick up locally. I hope I've understood some of the sense of your question, Dan, correctly, rather than totally reinterpreted it. Would anyone like to pick up on that? I mean, Charlie, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think D2C is a nice way of making sure that you've got that continued access to your customers and giving them access to your brand. But one of the biggest challenges with D2C is always pulling in the traffic, getting enough traffic to your D2C website so that you can make it worth your while and you can cover your costs in an effective way. So I think using dropship models then tied to marketplaces, other online retailers, I'm sure Drink Supermarket do it similarly to Amazon do it, in that you can set yourself up as a dropshipper via Amazon. You can access the traffic that they're already generating and tap into that in a way that makes your total business more viable and continues giving you that route to customer in a way that doesn't just drain all of your profits. So I think it's definitely something we've seen a lot more of. One of the biggest challenges that a lot of the online guys had, including Amazon, through the first couple of months of lockdown, was they simply didn't have capacity in their warehouses to be able to take all the inventory, and they cut back to 5 or 6 high priority categories, which didn't include beers, wines and spirits, and said these are the products we will stock, these are the ones that we will try, but no promises. And anyone who had the ability to drop ship didn't miss out on the business opportunity because they weren't reliant on the retailers' warehousing facilities and supply chains. So having that ability to be flexible on that and having those models in place just gives you more opportunity to weather these kind of storms, I think.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Okay. Does anyone else want to pick up on that or any other points? I think I'm looking at time. Forgive me, audience. We've got a few more questions here. What I'll do is I'll ask the panel very, very nicely if they might look at, if I can direct some of those questions to the panel, they might be able to come back to you on their own time, which would be very, very kind of them indeed. Anyone else want to add any sort of final or summing up comments? We've covered an awful lot of ground. There's been some really fantastic insights. I think there's a lot of food for thought to take away. It's obviously a still evolving situation, and I can't personally believe that there won't be some long-lasting changes and some innovations that will be built on going forward that will be positive for the trade when we finally manage to clamber beyond the sort of eye of the storm or the storm itself. Simon, Russell, anything you wanted to add? Anyone else? So everyone talked out. Okay, well, I think in that case, just remains for me to thank certainly first up the panel for giving your time today and for all your insights in the discussion. I'd like to thank you, the audience, for tuning in. Very much appreciate your support. To thank Quintessential Brands once more for supporting and enabling this session to happen. And just a reminder that throughout the rest of today, there are some further sessions, and I've just lost my document. Bear with me, everyone. Slight tech hitch in our Think Spirits Right, this isn't looking so professional. I need to pull up a document that was sitting in front of me. I just wanted to give a heads up on a couple more sessions that are running today as part of our virtual Think Spirits. Here we go. So don't go away with all of today. At 2 p.m, we have a presentation by Kantar World Panel. You'll find full details either on Drinks Retailing's website or Harper's Wine and Spirit, harpers.co.uk. And at 4 o'clock, we've got a Meet the Distiller session with Richard Seal of Foursquare. So both of those, I think, believe will be more than worth tuning into if you have the time. But otherwise, that's it for me. Thank you all. Great to see you all. And hopefully next time physically in person. Thank you very much.